I used to think getting robbed would feel cinematic, shattered glass, a cold draft through the broken window, that dizzy paranoid scan where you realize your world has been handled by someone who didn't earn the right. It turns out the ugliest part of a robbery is the paperwork and the way your house smells like cheap latex gloves for 2 days after the crime scene guys dust every surface you've ever touched. I'm Nate, 35, an audio engineer in Nashville. I grew up in Clarksville in a house where every room had a radio tuned to a different station, and you learned harmony by accident. I mix live sound at a mid-sized venue on Cannery Row, and when the tours swing through, I do a little road work to keep my lungs honest. I met Jess 2 years ago at a street show off 12 South where she was filming a friend's acoustic set with more enthusiasm than the band had followers. She ran Good Trouble, a little content agency that made brand videos for coffee shops and recovery centers and the hyper-local farm that sells eggs with adjectives. She was sunlight in a denim jacket and knew how to talk to strangers without making them feel like they'd been drafted into marketing. We fit easy. I brought the cables and the patience. She brought the edits and the way to turn a Tuesday into a story. She moved in fast because Nashville rents are rude, and also because my house in Wedgwood, Houston has a garage studio I built with my dad the summer before he died. We stacked her books with mine. She convinced me to let a fiddle leaf fig attempt life indoors. I convinced her that a kitchen needs one knife that is sharp, not six that are pretty. We practiced being people who believe in each other. The first odd thing that didn't look like an odd thing was the new friend. Jess started working with a videographer named Evan, who appeared like a pop-up ad suddenly in every story, every behind-the-scenes clip, every "we're on set again" selfie. He wears a beanie year-round and has opinions about lenses he delivers like prayers. At first I liked him. He carried gear, he laughed at my dumb jokes about lav mics, he said "sir" to my mom, the one time she popped by while they were shooting in our backyard and we were brining chicken for a cookout. He also bent over my old Martin D28 like a man being measured for something he couldn't afford and whispered, "One day," with a hunger I recognized from myself in a different decade. I have 3 guitars that matter. My dad's D28, a 1978 Telecaster. I hunted for 6 months, and a Guild hollow body that plays like a memory you don't want to wake up from. They live on the wall in the studio because part of loving a thing is letting it keep you honest by being visible. Jess is not a musician beyond 3 chords and an Instagram reel. She is, however, very good at pointing a camera at something beautiful and telling the internet why you should feel invited. She started pitching this idea last fall about Community Art Rescue, a series where we'd highlight artists in Nashville hurt by theft and raise money to replace their gear. She did a pilot with a friend's stolen bike and raised $600 in 2 days. It made her feel like grief could be organized. It made me feel like we were useful. She started asking me questions I thought were adorable, and now understand were a spreadsheet. "Do you have serial numbers for your guitars?" she asked one night, like a dentist pretending she's curious about your flossing habits. "Where do you log them? Do you have photos with dates? How would you prove they're yours?" "I'm not getting robbed," I said, laughing. "Nobody plans to," she said, and the way she said it should have touched a nerve. It did not. 2 months later, she suggested we do a full inventory of the studio for insurance. She made a shared document with tabs labeled guitars, mics, outboard, amps, cases, misc. I poured a beer and we made a night of it. We took photos of the serials and the scuffs and the way the maple neck on the telly glows when the light is kind. I argued with myself about whether to list what I paid or what Reverb says they're worth now. Jess didn't weigh in beyond. Put the highest number, babe. You can always go down. We also tagged the cases. That's my habit, not hers. I've been sticking little AirTags in secret pouches since some tweaker stole a snare from a buddy's car in 2019. Jess rolled her eyes and called me dad, like it was cute. I hid one in the Martin's case under the velvet pocket flap and one in the guild's lining. The telly lives mostly on the wall. I told myself nobody is strong enough to run with a pedal board and a 78 telly. I told myself thieves want laptops and pain meds. The night of the robbery started boring. I was at the venue doing a corporate gig where a healthcare company tried to convince their sales team they were a family. Jess was home editing and texting me about whether we should go to her friend's birthday at Pearl Diver the next night. At 10,530, while I was ringing out a bad ceiling resonance that made the CEO sound like a fridge, Jess sent a photo of Poppy, our neighbor's dog who adopts our yard whenever she feels like it, sleeping on our porch. "Tell Poppy to get a job," I wrote, and Jess replied with a heart. At 11,032, I got an alert from our security app. Garage door opened. Not weird, Jess sometimes starts laundry late. 30 seconds later, back door opened. 30 seconds after that, garage door closed. Jess texted, "You home soon?" I wrote, "On my way in 20. At midnight, I pulled into our alley and saw the garage door a foot off the ground. A single shoe print marked in dust on the lower panel like a signature. The back door frame was splintered. The studio's little window near the roof had been pried open and then unlocked from the inside. Every dread fact arrived in my body before my brain gave permission. Inside, the guitars were gone. The guild case slot was empty. So was the Martin's. The telly's hanger was naked, a bright rectangle of paint behind it where the sun hadn't aged the wall yet. 2 condenser mics were missing from their Pelican. The camera Jess had borrowed from Evan for a weekend shoot was nowhere. The drawers where we keep the easy-to-fence stuff loop pedals, SM58s, hard drives had been rummaged. The rest of the house was weirdly polite, like a burglar who respects books. Jess sat on the studio floor, palms on thighs like she'd been taught to breathe like that. She looked at me with a face I've only seen on people who just watched someone else's accident. "I'm sorry," she said. "I only left for 20 minutes to pick up milk. I forgot the garage code sticks. I didn't lock it hard. I'm so sorry." I wanted to say things to fix it. Instead, I called the cops. A patrol car came, took the report, dusted for prints that will never matter, handed me a card with a case number like a horrible party favor. "We'll check pawn logs," the officer said. "If you have serials, put them in the national system." I did. They advised us to start an insurance claim. I opened the portal and clicked until my finger went numb. Jess moved like a person underwater, gentle, apologetic, efficient. She made a pot of coffee like it was medicine. She took photos of the splintered frame and the scuff on the garage door. She said, "I'm sorry," like a song. Then, the next morning, before I could finish my second cup, she did the very Jess thing I fell in love with and now resent. She turned grief into a project. She drafted a "Help Nate replace his stolen gear" post for good trouble with photos of the empty hangers and my dad's guitar in my lap from last Thanksgiving and copy that made me look like the patron saint of sound guys. "I thought you'd want to control your own narrative," she said, voice gentle. "People love you. Let them help." The post went up at noon. By 4 p.m., strangers had donated $6,000. Bands I've mixed for shared it. A famous songwriter I patched once and didn't fanboy too hard over dropped $5,000 with a comment that made me want to cry and also hide. "Nate has saved more shows than he will ever brag about," he wrote. "Let's save his gear." Evan came over with the camera to film a short interview for the fundraiser because of course he did. He framed me on the couch with the broken frame on the coffee table for texture. He asked me to talk about my dad's Martin, and I did, careful not to mention the fact that I had hidden a coin-sized tracker in the lining of its case like a lunatic. He asked me to describe the feeling of violation, and I tried without sounding like I was auditioning for trauma points. Jess stood behind the camera and mouthed, "You're doing great." I almost believed her. That night, alone with my useless anger and the empty wall, I remembered the AirTags. It was like my brain had been watching me flail for 24 hours and finally handed me back my password. I opened Find My. I clicked on Martin Case. A gray spinner twirled like a slow idea. Then a blue dot popped up, north of us, near a strip of low warehouses off Murfreesboro Pike, moving slowly like a person walking or a car crawling to catch a light. My heart began to drum. I clicked Guild Case. A second dot on the same road. Telly? The telly hadn't been in its case, but I'd slipped an AirTag in a pick tin that lived in the pocket of my gig bag. I sometimes lean by the wall under the hanger when I'm lazy. That dot was with the others. A cluster. A caravan. I didn't call 911 right away because fear is dumb and male pride is dumber. I took 3 screenshots, texted them to myself and my buddy Travis because the future needs timestamps. Then I went into the living room where Jess was DMing thank yous and said, very calmly, because calm is how you get people to tell you the truth. The cases are moving. I put trackers in them. I have their location. She stared at me, and then at my phone, and then back at me. Oh my God, she breathed. Call the police. Her eyes were big and wet, the way someone looks when they want you to know they're on your side. Call them now. I did. The dispatcher was more interested than the patrol last night. He said a unit would meet me near the location and asked me to keep the app open. Don't engage, he said. Let us do the talking. We got in my truck. Jess insisted on coming. You are not going to meet thieves alone, and I didn't argue because driving around Nashville with your girlfriend with adrenaline for coffee feels like a plan even when it isn't. The dots moved east, then south, then settled near an address I recognized as a storage facility by the airport where every other unit smells like lawn equipment and secrets. A Metro officer pulled in behind us and did the talk. I assume they teach in a room with a whiteboard. We stay here, he goes around. If anything moves, we tell him. He took my phone and took interest. Smart, he said. And I wanted to be 8 again so I could tell my mom a cop had called me smart. He went in. 10 minutes later, he came out with a shrug that made my spine try to leave my body. No dice, he said. Manager won't open without a warrant. We don't have exigent circumstances. We can file and come back or wait for a ping that's more specific. A thunk in my chest. He could see the dot on my phone, but to a judge on paper, a blue circle isn't a key. We went home. I drank a whiskey I didn't enjoy. Jess took a bath longer than a person usually bathes. At 1 a.m., I got a ping in a different place, south. A 2-story house in Antioch with a chain-link fence and a truck with a lawn service logo in the driveway. I toggled play sound. Somewhere in Antioch, in someone's garage, my dad's guitar case chirped a noise like a toy in church. I laughed, a noise too close to crying, and Jess covered her mouth and then took my face in both hands and said, "We're going in the morning." We slept badly. In the morning, she made a plan. Jess is good at plans when cameras are involved, and it didn't occur to me to be suspicious. We drive by, you click the sound, we see if it's in the yard, she said. If it is, we call the cops with an address and a sound. They can knock without a warrant because consent to a yard is different than a storage unit. We handle it. We're heroes. We make a second video from victim to victory. People will love that we got them back. We drove to Antioch and did exactly what she said. The dot tightened as we turned onto the block. Play sound made its pathetic little ping like a heart monitor in a different room. We rolled by once, twice. On the third pass, the front door opened. A man in his 40s in gym shorts and a Titans hoodie stepped out with a beer, even at 9,030, and looked at us the way you look at people who are not doing a good job pretending they're not looking at your house. He waved like a neighbor, then cocked his head like a dog, like he could hear something the rest of the world didn't. "Call," Jess whispered, and I did. And a Metro cruiser rolled up ask me later fast. The officer did a knock and talk. "We've got a ping for stolen property," he said, polite. "Any reason we'd hear a beeping in your garage?" The man frowned, called into the house. "Bree, you got something beeping," and a woman's voice, no smile left in it, called back. "No, but there's a noise." The officer asked to take a listen. The man shrugged. We stood on the driveway like idiots while the garage door rolled up and revealed a lawnmower, a broken treadmill, and a stack of cases that used to live on my wall. It was almost funny how ordinary they looked. The officer turned to the man. "Mind if we open?" he asked. The man shrugged again like indifference was his religion. The officer looked at me. I wanted to run, to throw the cases open and smell proof. Instead, I handed him the photos from my inventory, cereals, scuffs, the way the Martin's pickguard has a cigarette burn from my dad being impatient. He compared scuff to scuff like a jeweler. "Matches," he said, and my lungs remembered their job. The couple said words that sounded like a story about a guy named E who paid them to store stuff because his cousin was moving. They had a phone number with too few digits and a memory with too much smoke. The officer wrote things down and called for another unit, and then, miraculously, allowed me to carry the cases back to my truck like a dad carrying his kid out of a hospital. We got home and put the guitars back on the wall. Jess filmed a quick "We got them back" video that made my teeth hurt, a breathless confession, a messy hair morning where she tells the internet to hide AirTags in their cases and trust the cops and believe in community. The donations doubled. A GoFundMe rep emailed saying they'd boost the campaign because of the happy ending. I should have been on the couch, crying with relief. Instead, I stood in the studio and stared at the empty Pelican slots where the mics had been, at the telly's hanger, at the scuff on the garage door, and felt a small, cold thought walk into my house and sit down. That was fast. Too fast. How did someone slip into our garage between 11:30 and midnight with my girlfriend home and know exactly what cases to grab, and exactly which window pops with a pry bar, and exactly when I'd be gone, and then move them first to storage and then to a house in Antioch that isn't a fence, but looks like one? And why did the first place we went, the storage unit by the airport, feel like a rehearsal to teach me that the system takes time, so I'd be grateful for any speed at all? At noon, while Jess was still replying to comments like a person running for office, my phone buzzed with a bank alert. "Your deposit from GoFundMe is pending." I hadn't set the account. Jess had. The campaign had been created under Good Trouble, not my name, and the funds were set to deposit into her business account with a plan to reimburse Nate as receipts come in. She'd mentioned that in passing, and I'd nodded because my brain was still stuck somewhere in an Antioch garage. I walked into the kitchen and said, "Maybe too flat. Change the bank. Put it in my checking. I'll reimburse the picks and strings and the time it took you to make me look like a noble cause." Jess didn't blink. "Of course," she said. "It was just faster to set it up under Good Trouble. I'll switch it." She picked up her phone and did the tapping we all do when we want to be seen doing the right thing. "Done," she said. "You're so cute when you're territorial." At 3, Metro called. "We recovered the mics," the detective said. "Pawn shop in Laverne. Your cereals did their job. I wanted to forgive every bureaucrat in Tennessee." He paused. "Funny thing, the guy who sold them had ID that says Evan Harper. That your friend?" I felt something like a trap door open under my sternum. The room tilted. "Yeah," I said. "He's Jess's videographer. He loaned her a camera." My voice sounded like the wrong key. "Camera was there too," the detective said. "He told the shop he was unloading some gear for a friend. We'll be asking him to come down. Wanted to give you a heads up since his name might be on your social media." I hung up, and Jess walked in with a towel on her head and a look that said she'd picked up the part of the room that had fallen. "Everything okay?" she asked, cautious now, like she could hear the wrong chord. "Evan pawned the mics," I said. "Police picked them up." She frowned like a person trying to make her face decide on a story. He was helping," she said, reaching for the first branch. "He thought we needed cash? He didn't know they were stolen? I'll call him. I'll—" "Don't," I said. and the word sounded different in my mouth than it ever has. Don't call anyone. She stared at me, and then over my shoulder at the guitars that had come back from the dead. Nate, she said softly, we're okay. We got them back. The internet is being kind. Don't ruin the arc. Ruin the arc. I grew up in rooms where men use arc to talk about things that aren't stories. Electricity, bridges, time. I took my phone out and scrolled through the screenshots of the AirTag dots, the storage facility, the Antioch house, the pawn ticket the detective had texted me with Evan's bad signature, the GoFundMe dashboard with Good Trouble LLC under beneficiary, and then I clicked the Ring camera clip from the night of the break-in. A clip I had watched twice while cops were in my house and dismissed as nothing, Jess. At 11:09, propping the back door with a wedge, stepping into the yard to call someone, whispering, now. And then, because I've watched her direct a dozen shoots in my living room, pointing at the garage door and the window with the quick, precise, she turned back into frame and saw me watching the clip and did that little smile that isn't quite an apology and isn't quite defiance. You don't understand branding, she said quietly, which is a very odd thing to say to a man holding evidence of his own robbery. What did you think would happen? I asked, not angry yet, just stunned, that I'd cry on camera and the internet would mail us guitars. Her jaw shook a little. No, she said, that you would get back what you deserve without having to wait for the universe to get around to you, that you'd finally let people love you loudly, that you would let me build something that matters. By stealing from me, I said. By curating a crisis, she said. And I almost laughed because she sounded like a deck at a conference called Storytelling for Nonprofits, presented by a person who has never been hungry. The rest of the conversation was a shape I will hear in my sleep, me saying words like felony, and she saying words like momentum, me saying police, and she saying community, me saying my dad's guitar, and she saying platform. Somewhere in there, I realized I was not talking to the woman who cried on my porch when Poppy put her head in Jess's lap and chose us. I was talking to the part of Jess that is a machine for attention and thinks truth is B-roll. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw a table. I did 3 boring things because boring is how you cut wires to a bomb. I texted the detective that I had footage and a name for the E, who used my neighbor's Antioch garage. I changed the password on the GoFundMe and sent the campaign a public update. Funds will be held until Metro closes the case. Any donors who want a refund can initiate one. And I sent Evan a text. Police have your pawn ticket. Call a lawyer. Jess stood in our kitchen and watched a person she loves stop being her crew. She put her hands on the counter and said, very gently, like a director trying to save a scene that has gotten away, Nate, please, you will look ungrateful. People are watching. Don't make me the villain because I know how to make a story work. You made yourself the villain, I said. And because my dad raised me to write things down before your mouth betrays your heart, I stopped there. That night, I slept on the studio couch because that is where my bones know how to lie down when a day has been too loud. I dreamed my dad tuned the Martin and then took the Tele and then handed me the Guild and then put his hand on my shoulder and said one sentence. I wish I didn't need a dead man to give me permission to believe. You are allowed to be the person who ruins a scheme. In the morning, the detective called to schedule statements. Evan had come in and told a story with more adjectives than verbs. He said he thought we were selling gear to fund the rebuild. He said Jess told him I was in on it. He said the Antioch house was a friend. Metro called that friend, and the friend called a lawyer, and the lawyer told him to shut up. The DA likes cases with AirTags and pawn tickets and Ring cameras and GoFundMe dashboards that turn good ideas into returns. Jess packed a bag. Not dramatic. No slammed drawers. She took her laptop, her favorite oversized sweater, the little toiletries bag she keeps for shoots. She stood in the doorway to the studio and looked at the wall with the guitars and said, I wanted you to have a story you could play. which is either the saddest thing anyone's ever said to me or the most manipulative. Call a lawyer, I said. Tell your donors you lied. Tell your mother yourself before she hears it from Facebook. Don't call yourself a crusader. She nodded, like she'd already tried out every version and picked the one with the fewest broken words. I'm sorry, she said. You have to know, I did it because I love you. I know, I said. That's why it's gross. She left. The house felt like the moment after a compressor releases and the room's true volume returns. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook and wrote a list because surviving a bad story requires a new one. Call the DA. Freeze the GoFundMe pending law enforcement. Write down every timeline exact. Call my mom. Call the venue. Figure out whether to keep the campaign or return every dollar. And decide what to do with a love that confuses theft with generosity. If you're wondering where the shock ends and the plan begins, it's right here, with a detective who told me, "Thank you for being boring," and a bank that paused a deposit without getting dramatic, and a man in Antioch who might not be a villain so much as a guy who agreed to be somebody else's garage. The second half of this story is courtrooms and donors and friendships that won't survive, and a little line on GoFundMe's TOS that matters more than Jess's speech about community. It's also, I hope, a point where I stop letting other people tell me what a good man should do with his own dad's guitar. GoFundMe's trust and safety team called before the sun figured itself out. The woman on the other end sounded like she'd been trained to talk a jumper off a ledge, and also like she had a checklist in front of her. She asked for the case number, the pawn slip image, the AirTag pings, the link to the fundraiser, and whether I wanted to pause donations or close and refund. I told her to pause and hold. She said, under our policy, suspected fraud results in a temporary freeze and a review. If fraud is confirmed or strongly indicated, we refund donors. If the beneficiary was materially involved, we also ban the organizer. We'll confirm in writing. Ban the organizer, I repeated, watching Jess's good trouble handle ping out, "We did it," replies on my phone like an automatic sprinkler. Organizer and any business entity linked, she said gently. I am sorry this happened. Your donors will get emails with next steps. You don't need to be a spokesperson. We'll handle that part. I hung up and called my mom. She's the person you call when your day is a knife and you need someone who knows where the band-aids are. I told her everything, beginning to end. She listened with those little uh-huhs she learned in church from women who know how to keep a room from coming apart. When I finished, she said, I love Jess. I still hope she grows into herself. But we don't call theft generosity. We don't call schemes love. I'll make a casserole. The detective put us on the calendar for statements 2 days later. He explained it in sentences that were boring on purpose. Conspiracy to commit theft. Theft by deception, fraudulent scheme to obtain property, filing a false police report if it came to that. The Antioch couple looks like they rented their garage for $50 and an alibi, he said. Not our targets. The man at the pawn shop ran the numbers the second the pings hit the system. That's why your mics were pulled. He did right. Evan showed up in a hoodie and a haircut he'd given himself in a mirror. He asked if he could just explain. The detective said yes, and then placed a recorder on the table like punctuation. Evan said the things men say when they've been caught doing something better than they've ever been at being honest. It was Jess's idea. He thought I knew. It was a brand thing. It was a victimless crime. Because the universe paid you back anyway. He only pawned the mics to get cash to pay the Antioch guy to keep the garage open. It was all passive construction with a name attached only when it made him look smaller than he felt. When the detective asked if he'd ever participated in a caper like this before, he hesitated long enough to make the pause a confession. The bike, he muttered, last summer. We curated it. After the statements, I walked out into a Tennessee afternoon that smelled like wet summer and somebody's overwatered lawn. Travis was waiting, leaning on his truck like a stereotype I needed. He put a to-go coffee in my hand and said, "You got your stuff back, now guard your name." He was right. I wrote a post short, dull, precise on my personal page because the rumor machine likes a vacuum. I got my guitars and mics back. Metro did the work. Thanks for the love. The fundraiser is paused pending the criminal case and will be refunded. If you gave because you care, I felt it. If you're angry, I get that too. I didn't call names. I didn't make speeches about community. If there's one thing I learned mixing sound for men who love a microphone, it's that most rooms don't need more speeches. 2 hours later, GoFundMe sent a mass email. Due to a violation of our terms, this campaign has been closed and donations automatically refunded. Good Trouble LLC's account has been suspended. We regret the inconvenience. If you want to support Nate directly, here is his Venmo. I never asked them to include that last line. People sent more money anyway. I redirected it to the venue's Stolen Gear Fund because years ago we set aside a small pot for when a band rolls up having been ripped off at a gas station. We never had more than a few $100s in it. Overnight, it swelled into a number that could replace a van's worth of gear for 3 bands. That felt better in my bones than a new pedal board. Jess texted once from a number I didn't recognize. The message was awful in its efficiency. I told the detective everything. Please don't make my life a feeding frenzy. I'm going to fix this. I sent it to the detective and then blocked the number. Fix doesn't mean what she thinks it means. The calls from clients started the next morning. A rehab center canceled a campaign with Good Trouble, pending review. A coffee shop wrote, "We are taking some time to reflect on partnerships." A farm posted a statement about learning from this moment. Jess went off social. Evan set his accounts to private and then, bizarrely, posted a story about haters and context. People who've never been wrong use the word haters like it's insurance. At the first arraignment, the DA asked the judge for conditions that sounded simple and strict. No direct or indirect contact with me. No crowdfunding under any name until resolution. No leaving the county except to visit counsel. Surrender passports. Jess's lawyer had the energy of a man who uses the word misunderstanding as punctuation. He argued for no contact but leniency on business restrictions. The judge looked at him over her readers and said, "What's the business?" He said, "Digital storytelling." She said, "Then tell a different story for a while." Conditions granted. I had one speech to make, and I made it in person to a group that doesn't clap for you, the donors who showed up at the venue the next week because I promised them an accounting. We set up folding chairs on the floor, and I brought a legal pad and the GoFundMe email and a printout that listed every donation and every refund line with a simple check mark. I answered every question like an audit. A man with calloused hands asked, "Are you taking any of it?" "No," I said. A teenage guitarist asked, "What about the people who still want you to have something?" "There's a link to the Stolen Gear Fund," I said. A woman with a baby on her chest asked, "Why do people do this?" "Because the internet turned attention into currency," I said, "and some folks figured out a way to mint more of it using pain." We talked about locks and cameras and instrument insurance and the statistic that most burglaries are half an inside job, half bad luck, and entirely boring until you turn them into content. 2 guys from a bigger venue brought a stack of flyers and said, "We're putting on a benefit for the benefit fund." I said yes and also no to any set where someone feels like asking me on stage to thank the crowd. "Y'all built this," I said. I just watched the dot move. At the preliminary hearing, Evan took a deal. Misdemeanor theft, restitution for the shop fees, and my time, community service with the condition that he complete a program on ethical storytelling online. Which is funny, until you imagine sitting in a rec center with 6 other 20-somethings who all thought Ring cameras were myths and hearing a social worker say, Tell me what honesty means. Jess didn't take a deal that day. Her lawyer asked for continuances like they breed in captivity. The DA's office sent me a short, factual note. We anticipate resolving this with diversion if she pleads to theft by deception and makes the donors whole. No jail, supervised probation, internet ban for raising money, community service, a fine, apology letters through our office, not online. When the letters came months later, mine was typed, not handwritten. It said, in careful nouns, that she'd crossed a line, that she had confused urgency with entitlement, that she had manufactured a moment, and that she had harmfully curated. She wrote, I thought I was building a bridge. I made a hole. I didn't write back. You don't write back to letters that exist because a judge told someone to learn a new verb. The Antioch couple ended up testifying to save their own trouble. The husband said Jess paid him cash for a garage for a few days. The wife said Jess described it as staging for a video. They looked tired, not evil, like the kind of tired that comes from being near a bonfire and thinking you're at a barbecue until your hair smells like smoke for weeks. Victor, different case, different city, wasn't part of this life, but I thought of him when the DA asked me, on the record, why didn't you go nuclear online? I said, paper lasts longer than posts. She nodded as if she'd been waiting to hear a civilian say that without being prompted. My venue family kept me busy. We ran a security workshop for touring bands. I made a handout that looked like a stage plot because musicians read those. Items, serials, AirTags hidden where thieves don't look. An insurance section, the number for the pawn log service. 3 simple playbooks, believe just enough to call, verify with a ping, stall with the policy that isn't yours, log everything. I told the class, don't be brave, be boring. Bring cops' addresses, not feelings. They laughed at feelings, and then wrote down addresses. Jess's mother called my mom and cried in a way that made my mother put her hand over the receiver and mouth to me. This is not our job. And then, because she is who she is, stayed on the phone 30 minutes while another woman tried to untangle the knot of love and consequence. Later, she told me, people raised to hustle love a person like Jess because she is what their culture made to survive. But hustle isn't honesty. It's not a sin to put them down sometimes. I told her she should write that down somewhere the internet can't delete. There was an evening in early fall where I saw Jess across a farmer's market. She was with 2 women I didn't know, and they were all carrying tote bags that declared kindness in font. She saw me see her. She didn't come over. She didn't flee. She put her hand on her own shoulder the way she used to put it on mine when she thought I needed to slow down. I nodded once. She nodded back. I felt nothing clean. No victory, no easy forgiveness. Just a well of calm that did not need to be named. Evan sent his restitution with a cashier's check and a note that said, sorry bro. He posted a selfie the next week with the caption, back shooting, new perspective, and comments from his friends that said, we all make mistakes, and one from a stranger that said, not this one. I didn't touch any of it. My name didn't belong to that story anymore. If you're waiting for a twist, there isn't one. There's something better, weeks without adrenaline. A morning where the only noise in my studio is a tube amp, warming like a friendly animal. A day where the email subject lines are dull, and my mother's casserole finally ran out, and I made dinner without having to explain what I did with the donations, or why I wouldn't accept a new pedal board someone wanted to mail me because they like being heroes. Poppy still sleeps on the porch when she feels like it. The fig tree still looks judgmental. The tele still buzzes if I stand too close to the fridge. But there was one thing I could do with all of it that felt like turning a bad song into a bridge. We took the refunded momentum and wrote rules. The venue owner's WhatsApp became a tiny standards committee. We wrote a crisis checklist for when an artist gets ripped off in our zip codes. Step 1, call the police and get a case number. Step 2, post serials in the stolen registry. Step 3, If you fundraise to the venue's trust, not to a person, for 72 hours. Step 4. No friend of friend storage units. No, we'll do the right thing later. No cash out until case status. Step 5. No documentary until the documentary is boring. We posted it in a shared Google Drive and an old forum and printed copies for the back offices. There was nothing sexy in it. That was the point. 6 months out, the DA sent a final email. Diversion completed. Civil restitution to the pawn shop and to the Antioch couple for their time. Apology letters filed. Probation satisfied. Platform ban remains through term. Case closed. If she messes up, they reopen and you get a subpoena. Keep your number. I kept the guitars. I did not sell them to make some statement about not letting things own me. Things don't own me, but they hold stories. My dad's pickguard still has the burn. The Martin still rings like the first honest thing you say after a lie has been running the room. What do I want you to take from this? Not a crusade, just a habit. Hide a tracker in what you can't stand to lose. Keep serials. When crisis comes, and it will, because life is sloppy, keep your voice low and your receipts handy. Let platforms do their job. Let courts be boring. Don't let anyone convince you that a scheme is love or that public adrenaline is immoral. Be the person who ruins a plan that uses your name as a prop. There's no applause. There's sleep and a clean room and a guitar that comes home. What would you have done? Would you have left the fundraiser open because the money was already there and you didn't make the mess? Would you have called the Antioch guy a criminal or done what I did and save your outrage for the 2 people who knew the door code? Would you have kept the donations and argued that the crowd wanted to help, or refunded every dollar and turned the river toward a fund that will cut checks to strangers at 2 a.m.? Because thieves don't care what time your show ends. Tell me, drop it below. Hit like if you want this to find the next person watching a little blue dot move on a map toward a place they've never been, and making the decision to be calm instead of cinematic. Subscribe if you want more. Long, messy, true-feeling stories, where the twist isn't a masked burglar. It's a ring notification at 11,029, a pawn slip with a familiar signature, and choosing to be the person who brings a room back to zero before anyone grabs a mic.